Welcome back to Audit ABCs with Jess, where we simplify auditing one standard at a time. Today we're covering ISA 230, Audit Documentation, one of the most important standards in practice. ISA 230 tells us how to properly document an audit, not just what to test, but how to record our thinking, our judgments, and our conclusions. It exists because audits are reviewed by people who were never part of the engagement: partners, quality reviewers, regulators like IRBA, and sometimes auditors years later. If your documentation doesn't clearly explain what you did and why, the assumption is simple: the work didn't happen. So, ISA 230 protects you, the firm, and the audit opinion by making sure your audit file stands on its own. Fun fact, and this one is very real: in IRBA inspections, one of the most common reasons audit files are graded as partially compliant or non-compliant is not because the audit work was wrong, but because the documentation didn't clearly show the auditor's thinking. ISA 230 expects your audit file to tell a clear and logical story from start to finish. That story should show how you planned the audit, what risks you identified, how your procedures responded to those risks, what evidence you obtained, and how all of that supports the final audit opinion. Anyone reading your file should be able to follow your thinking without needing to ask you questions. The standard says your documentation must allow an experienced auditor with no prior involvement to understand four things: nature, timing, and extent of procedures, results, significant matters identified, and conclusions reached. Nature, timing, and extent of procedures. This answers the question, what exactly did you do? Your working papers should clearly show what procedure was performed, when it was performed, how much work was done. For example, instead of saying tested expenses, your file should explain the sample size, the period selected, and the source documents used. This shows that your procedures were appropriate and sufficient. Next, ISA 230 requires you to document what you found. This includes whether exceptions were identified, the value and nature of those exceptions, and how they were resolved. Remember, even when no issues are found, that conclusion must be stated clearly. Silence creates doubt. Clarity creates confidence. Significant matters are anything that required extra attention or professional judgment. This could include high-risk areas, complex estimates, changes in audit approach, disagreements with management, or indicators of fraud or bias. ISA 230 requires not only that these matters are documented, but also how they were addressed. Finally, every procedure must end with a conclusion. Your conclusion should clearly state what the results mean, whether the audit objective was achieved, and how this supports the relevant assertion or risk. A working paper without a conclusion is incomplete, no matter how much testing was done. One of the biggest focuses of ISA 230 is professional judgment. Whenever you make a judgment, like why a sample size was sufficient, why a misstatement was considered immaterial, why no further testing was required, you must document the rationale behind that decision. Reviewers don't just want the answer, they want to understand how you got there. ISA 230 also deals with when documentation must be completed. Audit documentation should be prepared on a timely basis, not months after the work was done. Once the audit file is finalized and locked, changes are restricted. You may add explanations or clarifications, but you may not delete or conceal information, and all additions must be clearly dated and explained. These are the issues that commonly show up in inspections: generic templates, no link between risks and procedures, conclusions missing or unclear, review notes cleared without explanation, judgment exercised but not documented. All of these weaken the audit, even if the work itself was solid. Here's a simple rule that works every time. Document your work as if you'll never see this client again, and someone else must finish the audit using only your file. If your documentation can stand on its own, you're complying with ISA 230. ISA 230 reminds us that audit quality isn't just about doing the work, it's about proving the work. Strong documentation protects your opinion, your firm, and your professional reputation. Thank you for watching, and if this video helped, like and subscribe for more simple ISA breakdowns.